Communication scholars and researchers have come to realize that the sensible way to begin improving our communication skills is by understanding our own self-communication. This processing of internal messages called intrapersonal communication involves the internal communication patterns we use to talk to ourselves either consciously or unconsciously on both verbal and nonverbal levels. As I mentioned earlier in this profile, self-talk can be a very important skill to learn. Your understanding of yourself is known as your self-concept. It represents your psychological self, all the experiences, beliefs, attitudes, and values that make up the self. It includes how you perceive the world and how you think the world perceives you. Self-concept is the guiding factor in a person's actions, noted one source. How a human being views oneself will determine most of his or her actions and choices in life. Essentially, a person is going to choose what he or she feels he or she is worth. Thus, the more positively you perceive yourself, the more likely it is that you will have self-confidence, that is, a sense of competence and effectiveness. We know that the development of self-esteem is the primary prerequisite of learning. When we feel good about ourselves, we can become involved in the world of other people and things. We can risk learning something new, meeting new friends, engaging in a new venture. We realize that even if we fail, we can handle that possibility. Much of our self-concept stems from what we learn and how we process it. Because each of us has wants and needs that must be met, our early experiences, including whether our needs were met, influence how we view ourselves and others. This recognition of the importance of self-esteem is not a new development. Because the addict and the family has lived in two different worlds for a number of years, it may take some time for the two, addict and family, to communicate with one another. It's going to take a while for the addict to build up his self-esteem, so he can feel good about making the effort to learn how to communicate with the family. In my recovery system, the first stage of the system is one's self-assessment. By using the self-assessment, I would practice what I wanted to say to my family by writing it out on paper, and going over it until it sounded right. It was clear that I just didn't know how to talk to my family in a proper way, so by using the self-assessment, writing down what I wanted to say, I was able to talk to my family. It wasn't easy at first, but as time went by I got better and better at it, and after a while, I didn't have to write it out first. As time went by, I also noticed that my fear of saying the wrong thing seemed to just disappear, and I was able to open up and say what I really wanted to say by having the courage to accept the feedback from my family. Now, let's go on to Part 9, Communication. Part 9, Elton here. Now let's talk about the addict's assertive communication. Insight to narcissistic assertive thinking and family communication. The drug addict, in all his or her glory, the angry passive drug addict wants what he or she wants, when they want it, as soon as possible. The angry temperament of the addict shows his or her anger only because that's all they got inside to show and give. Many times my wife and I would argue over my drinking, usually about coming home drunk in front of the kids, spending the needed money on booze, and smelling like I rolled around in a hog pen because I had so much booze in me, sweating like a pig. Many times she would tell me she could smell me as soon as I opened the door. My kids would tell me, "Daddy, you stink." But it didn't hurt my feelings at all. My wife would start in on me, and the only way I could get back at her is to somehow make it sound like it was her fault I got drunk. I had to use my addiction assertive voice to get back at her. In other words, I had to come across stronger than she was. Sometimes, the arguing got so intense the kids started to cry, then I would blame her because the kids were scared and crying. This situation in return gave me a reason to go back out the door and drink some more. I knew I was going to catch hell when I got home from a drinking episode with my buddies, so before I got home I would dream up a reason why I was so late and drunk, and I had to make it sound very good. Our car was old and had many mechanical problems, so I would simply blame it on the car. It broke down, and had to buy the part needed to fix the car. Bingo, I had an excuse why I was late and why I had so much money missing out of my check. One time she told me it's funny how the car only breaks down on payday. How many of you out there can relate to the above story? If you're an alcoholic, you've most likely went through the same setting. When the addict cannot see any other way out of a situation, he or she will try to make it sound like the other person deserved it because the other person was upsetting the addict to a point he or she had to find a way out of the situation. So the addict uses his or her assertive right to aggro back as a defense tactic. I did it to try to get her to shut her big mouth, and most of the time it worked, but sometime it didn't. My next door neighbors were a good distance away from my house, and they told my wife there were times we could be heard as plain as if we were standing next to them. Let me give you some of the addict's assertive aggressive moves used as a defensive move. 1. I would interrupt my wife as often as I could. That kept her from talking too much. I would tell her she has no right saying what she is saying. I tried to make her feel as small as possible. 2. I would try to speak louder than her. That gave me the upper hand. By doing this it made me feel right and she was wrong, and on many occasions, she would back down and go away. 3. I would stare at her, look at her straight in the eyes. That made me feel like the boss. I would try to let her know by expressions that I was getting very upset. 4. I would try to intimidate her. That would cause her to lose her train of thought. I would do my best to get her to change the subject so that my drinking wasn't what we were talking about. 5. I would try to make it clear that she was wrong. That also gave me the upper hand. I would try and make it sound like she was accusing me of something I didn't do. 6. I would stand up straight, cross my arms, and get as close to her as I could. This was hoping she would back down and stop. 7. I would make it clear I didn't care about how she was feeling. I only wanted my demands to be met, and that was to stop. 8. I would put it in plain English that I was the only one working in the family. This I tried to make her feel little, not that important. 9. I would try my best to hurt her feelings, so that maybe she would stop, but most of the time she ended up crying. Then I knew her feelings were hurt enough to stop. 10. Most of the time I walked away a winner, but she would never let me forget the things I said. She would always let me know that I was spending too much money in the bars, but most of the time she would just simply tell me I was impossible to talk to and just stopped and walked away. You, the person in recovery, this behavior has to stop and you have to learn how to talk like a normal human being and not like an assertive jerk. You have to get off that high horse and act like that caring person you are trying to be. Your addictive physical, intellectual, emotional, and behavioral traits as that drug addict has to come to an end, and you have to be aware that recovery may last a very long time. As you continue through recovery, you will find your stress level slowly leaving you. But on the other hand, you need to take into consideration your family members' stress level also. This is why it's so important for both you and family to be involved in a stress management working program. You must realize that the whole family has a stress problem, and for many years it was a case of who could yell the loudest and who could last the longest. Many times as my children got up there in age to where they were allowed to go out on their own, they would simply get up and leave. They just didn't want to hear it anymore. This situation started to cause some problems with one of my kids hanging around with others she shouldn't have, and she started to get into a little trouble. In a few more years, my son started the same thing. It wasn't long and we, my wife and I, had more trouble than we wanted out of both the children. Now, if you go onto YouTube and look up family drug-related dysfunctional family living, and look for John Bradshaw, you can learn everything you have to know about what your children go through living in the dysfunctional family setting. Another good author is Grace Chatting. She can give your wife all the information she needs on living with the alcoholic. Grace and her work opened my eyes to just what kind of jerk I was all those years drinking. By listening to her 20 videos on YouTube I knew exactly how I treated my wife and kids, and she, Grace, really let me know just how I behaved towards my wife and kids. No wonder my wife was so upset all the time. I strongly suggest you look the two authors up, watch their videos, and learn as much as you can. Believe me, you can find anything you need on YouTube and crash course to help you get things under control. The recovering addict has to understand that the family members are in recovery the same as he or she is, and they need the time also to get their lives back in order. Usually, on my way home from drinking, I would plan ahead exactly what excuses I was going to give to cover my drinking. I gave it some serious thought on how not get into too much trouble. I knew I was going to hear it when I got home, but I just didn't care. A very important situation my wife got very serious about was the type of language I picked up through the years drinking. The language wasn't very nice to hear, especially in front of the children. I made her a promise that I would not use that kind of language again. Believe me, not using that type of nasty language was a hard habit to break, but I did it. There is no single way for all people from addiction to psychoactive drugs. Each addicted person fights an individual battle. Don't be discouraged. Your special program, the one you develop, will actually offer more hope to your family than any out there does today. The only one who can really understand the addiction is you. This is why a recovery profile needs to be developed by the recovering addict so he has guides to go by. In your personal profile, you need to be as honest as possible, no lies or make-up stories, just the simple truth will do. If you can't be open and honest about yourself, you're not going to be open and honest with your family. There are so many feelings, emotions, and behaviors that has to be changed, that help from your family should really be appreciated, because I doubt very much if you, the addict, can remember all that was done and said to the family members. You're in recovery, you're home with your family, now you got to be strong enough to take what your family will dish out to you. Point blank, you are going to catch hell, big time, so don't forget to tell yourself you deserve everything you got coming to you. To be honest, I went through all of it and then back again. For a couple of years I took everything I had coming to me until I told the family, enough is enough, I know I deserved it all, but it's time to stop hammering at me and let's start living like a family. To my surprise, they all agreed. My biggest problem was learning how to talk to my family members like a normal husband or father would talk, not like a complete addicted jerk. Still today, if I slip and say something like a nasty addict would say, my daughter jumps all over me. Anxiety, excessive worry, or concern is another important variable that may affect our perceptions and performance with communicating. Communication anxiety, or communication apprehension, can affect our processing of information. Though many think of communication anxiety only in regard to public speaking, it is much broader. Worries, concerns, and fears interfere with efficient listening, communicating in groups, talking in class and on the telephone, and verbalizing during interviews. Anxiety can make us so preoccupied we do not get the message that is being communicated, or we become incapable of staying in the conversation. Anxiety about communicating often reflects negative feelings about oneself. Some people have difficulty sharing themselves with others and feel uncomfortable about communicating in selected situations. Other people have difficulty communicating at all. This sort of apprehension has become such a general problem that it has been called the new social disease of the American populace. As terms, shyness and communication apprehension have been used by various authors to explain what may or may not be the same phenomenon. Shyness has been defined as quietness or has been used to refer to someone who doesn't talk much, whereas communication apprehension describes fear or anxiety about or in communication. This discussion uses the latter term and defines it as the fear or anxiety associated with either real or anticipated communication with another person or persons. People with this trait are referred to as communication apprehensives, feelings of fear or harm. No matter what label is used to describe the problem, the evidence is conclusive. Most people seem to possess this sort of apprehension at least to some extent. One study estimated that 80% of the people in this country confess to being shy and that only about 7% of all Americans have never felt shy. Other researchers indicated that virtually 100% of us experience communication apprehension from time to time, and almost 95% of the population reports having apprehension about communicating with some person or group in their lives. Communication between the addict and the family most likely is a huge roadblock when it comes to the family communicating. I would venture to say, for what I have learned through the years, that family communication is the second biggest roadblock that addict's family has to deal with. You cannot get anything straight unless you can talk to one another. Communicating with family members concerning recovery issues is very important, but unfortunately all members of the family have to learn how to communicate with each other. For the person who is uncomfortable being a communication apprehensive, in fear or dread of possible evil or harm, and wants to do something about it, skill training, systematic desensitization, cognitive modification, and self-help are possible forms of aid. It's a fact that through the years, the addict's family members may have created a shy or afraid outlook towards the addict. Talking to the addict is sometimes not an easy thing to do, and some of the family members may be downright afraid to talk back to the addict. Let's face it, if the family cannot learn how to talk things out with one another, there is simply no recovery. This situation may take a few years to work its way out, but it can be done if all family members work together on the communication problem. My wife and I had to learn how to talk to one another. It took us several months, but as time went by, talking became much easier and more often. There are many how to communicate study programs on the internet to choose from, but I never found any of them helpful. My communication problems I had with my family had to be worked out, and as time went on, before long we were talking to one another just like any normal family would talk. I learned that fear was my biggest roadblock with learning how to talk to my family. I also realized that stress would prevent me and my family members from saying what was on our mind. I was always afraid of saying the wrong thing. My wife said that sometimes she was afraid to say to me what was on her mind in fear of saying the wrong thing also. But we worked it out, and we came to realize that time and patience was our two best friends. Now if you're ready, go on to part 10, those terrible stressful situations. Stress, the recovery killer. And always keep in mind that everything's controlled by the brain, therefore, as you think, so shall you be. Do you still remember those words I ask you to keep in the back of your mind? Well, in case you forgot, involuntary, repetition and habit. All three words really do mean something. Try and figure the meaning out on your own. Next, is part 10. In dealing with stress, your self-talking skills really come in handy.